Dear learners, welcome you all in today's session of this online course on principles of landscaping and gardening. In the previous lecture, we learned about the different elements of landscape design such as color, texture, line and forms. Principles of landscape design guide designers in organizing these elements for visually pleasing landscape. So, let's dive into the world of landscape design and discover the principles that shape our outdoor environment. So, what are design principles anyways? Design principles are guidelines that help create pleasing relationship between the various elements of a composition. Landscaping and gardening share some fundamental principles, but each also has its own nuances. A harmonious arrangement is attainable through principles such as proportion, order, repetition, and unity, all of which are interconnected. Implementing one principle facilitates other attainment of others. Physical and psychological comfort, crucial concept in design, are realized by employing these principles effectively. Before going through the principles, these are the list of things that are also considered in designing a landscape, which are initial approach, axis, division lines, etc., which first I am going to discuss one by one. The first is that is initial approach. A skilled designer should utilize the available space effectively, preserving the natural topography whenever possible. Fencing should be blend seamlessly with the surroundings and adhere to principles of landscape gardening without obstructing any natural views. For instance, if there is natural forest scenery or a hillock outside the boundary, it should be thoughtfully incorporated into the garden design to seamlessly integrate with the overall landscape. Then the next point to be considered is axis. In any garden, an imaginary line known as the axis serve as the foundation for creating a balanced design. The next one is mass effect. The use of single plant species in large numbers in one place is done to have mass effect. One should see that such mass arrangement do not become monotonous. The size of masses should be varied. In this image, we can say there is a mass of different flowers that giving them a identity, because when they placed alone, they may not showing this kind of effect individually. Next is divisional lines. In a landscape garden, rigid divisional lines should be avoided, though there may be a need to screen off certain areas like compost pit or vegetable gardens. Areas under lawn, gravel stone or cement path and shrubbery borders naturally delineate from their surroundings, albeit subtly. Divisional lines should feature gentle, artistic curves and serve a functional purpose while also harmonizing with each other and the overall design. Next point to be considered is space. The objective of garden design is to give the illusion of a larger space than its actual size. One method is to maintain expansive open areas, primarily with lawn, and limit plantings around the perimeter, avoiding central planting whenever possible. If central planting is necessary, opt for a tree with elevated branching or removed lower branches rather than dense shrubbery to maintain visibility and prevent the garden for appearing smaller. In this particular, another suggestion is to enhance the purpose. In this regard, another suggestion to enhance the perception of space in larger public garden is to alternate large lawns with cluster of trees. A sprawling open space with scattered trees can diminish the perceived size, a technique known as force perspective. Then, in texture, the surface quality of a garden element is known as texture, as we have already discussed in elements, which encompasses the ground, leaves of trees or shrubs, determining the overall garden effect. Typically, texture is categorized into three types: fine, medium, and coarse, influenced by leaf size, branch arrangement, and canopy density. Additionally, texture can be characterized as rough or smooth based on their appearance. For example, in this gulmohar tree exhibit fine texture when in full leaf, while the Spathodia campaniata present a coarse texture, achieving a desirable effect entails harmoniously and contrastingly placing these varied texture within the garden. Light and time in a garden, the consideration of time is crucial. The garden design should be strategically planned to offer shaded seating areas in the afternoon, ensuring visibility of the best part of the garden. Understanding the growth habits of plant is essential for proper placement, influencing the overall layout planning. Tone and color in landscape garden. Green tones from trees and shrubs serve as the enduring backdrop, while a garden with subtle tones of entirely white or yellow flowers can be charming. It's preferable to have masses of a single color rather than a mixture. For instance, a bed of roses in a single color like red, yellow, or pink emanates a softer tone and beauty compared to mix of colors. A proficient garden architect could grasp color theory and employ color schemes to craft a captivating garden palette and utilize color schemes to create a charming garden palette. As we can see in these flowers, there is a implemented with color scheme and showing a beautiful appearance of these flower colors. Mobility in temperate zones. Garden undergoes sharp and contrasting color changes from one season to another, symbolizing mobility or movement. For instance, many trees in temperate region display stunning hues as their leaves change color during autumn. As we can see, these are the mobility in the temperate region showing beautiful orange and reddish color during the seasons. Then selecting a style is vital for particular garden. Every garden designer should cultivate their distinct gardening style, considering factors such as budget, personal preferences, site characteristics, and maintenance convenience. Crafting a unique design entails in-depth exploration of diverse garden styles globally and grasping their fundamental principles. By adhering to these principles, gardener can create and maintain healthy, beautiful, and sustainable outdoor space that thrive over time. Now, come to the principles. As I mentioned, Design principles can be organized or categorized in numerous ways, but for the sake of simplicity, I am going to call these principles include unity, balance, transition, focalization, proportion, rhythm, repetition, and simplicity. All these principles interact to yield the intended design. Now will discuss them. Now I will discuss these principles one by one. Now starting from the proportion. Coming to the first principles of landscape design, that is proportion. The size of different elements in a landscape design should be in proportion to the overall size of the space. For example, you would not want to use a large tree in a small garden. Consideration of proportion ensure elements fit harmoniously into the landscape. Absolute proportion refer to the object scale. Relative proportions like house and yard size ensure elements fit well. For instance, a small pool suits a private area while a large fountain complements a city plaza. Proportion can be found in plant material relative to people, the surrounding plants, and the house. When all these are in proportion, the composition feels balanced and harmonious. A feeling of balance can also be achieved by having equal proportion of open space and planted space. Using markedly different plant sizes can help to achieve dominance through contrast with a large plant. Using plants that are similar in size Using plants that are similar in size can help to achieve rhythm through repetition of size. A hardscape should be proportional to the house. A decor patio should be large enough for entertaining, but not so large that it does not fit the scale of house. Benches, tables, pathways, arbors, and gazebos work best when people can use them easily and feel comfortable using them. As we can see in this image, there is a proportion of the each elements like plants as well as hardscapes. Similar to this, proportion of invites human scale is also important for psychological comfort in wide or open spaces. People feel more secure in smaller open areas such as patios and terraces. An important concept of spatial comfort is enclosure. Most people feel at ease with sort of overhead condition, as in this case, that imply a ceiling. The enclosure does not have to be solid. In fact, an implied enclosure does not have to be solid. In fact, an implied enclosure such as tree branches serve as a good psychological enclosure that still allows light and view of the sky. Proportion in garden refer to the defined relationship between different elements. For instance, a rectangular with a ratio of 5:8 is considered to have pleasing proportion. If this ratio deviates, the form may appear neither square nor rectangular, resulting in an undesirable design of a garden. Balance in landscape design guarantees an equitable distribution of visual weight surrounding a central axis, impacted by factors like form, color, size, and texture. It may manifest as symmetrical, maintaining identical mass on both sides, or it may manifest as asymmetrical. It may manifest as symmetrical, maintaining identical mass on both sides, or may be asymmetrical, featuring irregular placement of perceived equilibrium. Perspective balance takes into account foreground, midground, and background elements adjusting visual weight accordingly. Balance can be symmetrical, asymmetrical, or perspective. Like symmetrical balance is achieved when the same objects are placed on either side of an axis. Figure shows the same trees, plants and structure on both sides of the axis. As we can see, this is the axis and the placement of plants, trees are equally proportional and symmetrical on the both sides of this axis. They are equally distributed. This type of balance is used in formal design and in one of the oldest and most desired spatial organization concepts. This is because the mind naturally divides space by assuming a central axis and then seeks an even distribution of object or mass. As here is the division of mass as well as the plantations and as well as the hardscapes. Many historical gardens are organized using this concept of symmetrical balance. The next is asymmetrical balance, which is achieved by equal visual weight of non-equivalent form, color and texture on either side of an axis. We can see there is a axis, there is a both side equal visual weights, but their forms are different. We can see there is a different forms of trees. Here, this side there is a different forms. These two different forms, texture and color are equally visual weight, but they are not equal in their forms and texture. This is giving the appearance of asymmetrical balance. This type of balance is informal and is usually achieved by masses of plants that appear to be the same in visual weight rather than total mass. Figure shows grouping of trees and structures that are approximately equal in visual weight on either side of the axis. The mass can be achieved by combinations of plant, structures and garden ornaments. To create balance, features with large sizes, dense form, bright color and coarse texture appear heavier and should be used sparingly, while small sizes, spare forms, grey or subdued color and fine texture appear lighter and should be used in greater amount. The next is perspective balance, which is concerned with the balance of the foreground, midground and the background. When looking at the composition, the objects in front usually have a greater visual weight because they are closer to the viewer. This can be balanced if desired by using a larger objects, brighter colors or core texture in the background. In most cases, either the foreground or background should be dominant. Mass collection is the grouping of features based on similarities and then arranging the groups around a central space or feature. A good example is the organization of plant material in masses around an open circular lawn area or open gravel seating area. The next principle is order. Order generally refers to the spatial layout or organization of the design and is most often achieved through balance. Order can also be achieved by massing feature or elements into distinct groups and arranging them around a central point. Order generally refers to the spatial layout or organization of the design and is most often achieved through the balance. Order can also be achieved by massing features or elements into distinct groups and arranging them around a central point. As we can see, this is the central point and there is an arrangement, a balance of the different plant species, borders. These are maintaining an order through the arrangement of balance. Then repetition. Repetition refers to the repeated use of the same or similar elements throughout like plants with identical shape, line, form, texture and color. Too much repetition creates monotony, but when used effectively can lead to the rhythm, focalization or emphasis. Unity can be achieved better by no other means than the repetition. Think of repetition as not having too much variety in the design, which creates a cluttered or busy appearance. Repetition is created by repeated use of elements or features to create a pattern or sequence in the landscape. Repeating line, form, color, and texture creates rhythm in the landscape. Repetition must be used with care. Too much repetition can create monotony, and too little can create confusion. Simple repetition is the use of same object in a line or in grouping of geometric form such as a square in an organized pattern. Repetition can be made more interesting by using alternation, which is a minor change in the sequence on a regular basis. For example, using a square form in a line with circular form inserted every fifth square. Inversion is another type of alternation where selected elements are changed so the characteristics are opposite the original element. For example, a row of vase-shaped plant and pyramidal plant in an ordered sequence. Gradation, which is the gradual change in the certain characteristic of a feature, is another way to make repetition more interesting. Repetition does not always create a pattern. Sometimes it is simply the repeated use of same color, texture, or form throughout the landscape. Repetition in landscape design entails the utilization of elements such as plants with similar shape, line, form, texture, or color, which can establish rhythm and emphasis but risk monotony if excessively applied. Unity is reinforced through the repetition, which can be rendered more captivating with alternation, introducing subtle variation in the pattern. For instance, alternating vase-shaped plant with pyramidal plants exemplifies the principles. Repetition in plants and hardscape. Using the same plant repeatedly in a landscape is simple repetition. A grass garden is a good example of subtle plant repetition. Gradation can be achieved with gradual change in height or size. Using small grasses in front, backed by medium grasses and then large grasses. A more obvious gradation in plants that transition from fine to coarse texture or from light green to dark green. Material can be used repeatedly throughout the yard for unity, but interest can be created by slightly varying the size, texture, or color for hardscape material. Repetition and pattern can be made most obvious in hardscape because duplication is easiest with build material that are manufactured to exact dimensions. An example would be the use of a square form that gradually become smaller or larger. Figure illustrate repetition of a square form in the entry, courtyard, lawn panels, a patio and water features. As we can see, there is a lawn, patio, water features. All these things are arranged in the form of a square and creating a repetition pattern of a square. Unity is defined as oneness, being one, interconnection of parts, coherence of parts. So, how do we bring that oneness, that coherence of parts into our gardens? There are several ways we can achieve this repetition, dominance, unity of three and interconnection. Unity then is an umbrella principle for all these concepts. So unity means that all parts of the composition of landscape go together, they fit. A natural feeling involves when each activity area belongs to and blends with an entire landscape. Everything selected for a landscape must complement the central scheme and must above all serve same functional purposes. The simplest way to create unity is through the use of design theme or design style. Design themes and styles have well-defined set of features that have maintained their popularity over time because they are visually pleasing to many. Paraphrase into 6 lines. Unity is achieved by linking elements and features to create a consistent character in the composition. Unity is sometimes referred to as harmony, the concept of everything fitting together. By comparison, scattered grouping of plants and unrelated garden ornaments are the opposite of unity. Unity is achieved by using dominance, interconnection, and by unity of three and simplicity to arrange colors, texture, and form. Although hardscapes and plants can be unified by blending of similar characteristics, some variety is also important to create interest. Design themes and styles have well-defined set of features that have maintained their popularity over time because they are visually pleasing to many. In this figure, we can see the isolation of plant material in container from the other plants creating a unity. The unity can be created by dominance, interconnection, unity by three, and by simplicity. Unity by dominance. Unity by dominance is the property of a plant or object that attracts and holds attention, making the object an important feature. The ability of an object to capture attention usually depends on contrast with adjacent object. A typical example of our garden would be a very brightly colored ceramic pot among green foliage. Dominant features that capture attention are called focal points. As we can see, there is a pot in the center creating the dominant feature. Focal points are used to draw attention to a particular location, move the eye around the space, or guide circulation. Emphasis is created through contrast in size, color, form, or texture. Plants that draw attention are often called specimen plants. These are plants with unique form, size, or texture that stand out from the surrounding plants, as in case here we can see this is a plant in container creating an emphasis than other plants. Ordinary plants can also be used for emphasis by isolating the plants in container or in open space. This is the simple example of this ordinary plants creating emphasis. Purposefully placing plant in this way draws attention to the plants. Specimen plants are usually used to draw attention to entrances, pathways, or sanctuary. Garden ornaments also work well to attract attention because they are often dramatically different from plant material. Form and color are usually the characteristics that contrast the most with plants. Sculptures, planters, and furniture have form and that are easily recognizable and distinguishable from plants. Then, unity can also be created by interconnection. Interconnection, the concept of physical linkage of various features, is present in all design. Although all features are linked to each other, the key is to make linkage seamless so that the features blend or fit together. Hardscape is important to interconnection because it typically serves to organize and link spaces in the garden. Suppose continuation of a line such as path, the edge of a built object, or a defined edge of a plant bed can create unity through interconnection. Then unity of three features that are grouped in three or in other groups of odd numbers such as in groups of 5 or 7 feel more balanced to the eye and give a stronger sense of unity. Odd numbers allow for staggered variation in height such as small, medium and large that provide more interest. Odd numbers are often seen or perceived as a group and are not an easy split or visually dividing as even numbers. And lastly, unity also created by simplicity. Simplicity is the concept of reducing or eliminating non-essentials to avoid a chaotic loop. This brings clarity and purpose to the design. Many designers achieve simplicity by thoughtfully removing features from a design while still preserving its integrity. Like in this, we can see simplicity coupled with repetition is attained through the removal of unnecessary detail, avoiding confusion from the excessive variety or detail. It involves streamlining a design to the most functional form, reducing unnecessary expenses and maintenance requirement. Simplicity goes hand in hand with repetition and can be achieved by elimination of unnecessary details. Too much variety or detail creates confusion or perception. Simplicity and variety work together to balance each other. Simplicity is the reduction of a design to its simplest functional form, which avoids unnecessary cost and maintenance. For simplicity, repeat some plant material in sweeps and groupings, and for variety, fill with other plants. Avoid creating horticultural zoo, one of this, two of that. Zipper planting like red white lack simplicity and variety. As we can see in this particular image, simplicity and variety. Simplicity is created by there is a blocks of simplicity in this particular figure. Simplicity is created by the green grasses carpet, which is alternating with the rectangular shape ceramic base. In this simple drawing, simplicity is gained with the shrub row repeating the same plant material. And in this simplicity, variety is added with the tree. This is all giving a simplicity and this tree giving it a variety. Similarly, at Abkhazi Garden, Victoria, simplicity is created with the row of purple heather and the lawn, and variety is created with the assortment of plant material on the rocky hillside. As we can see, this is the creation of simplicity and the variety is created by the rocky hillside. These are the creating the variety and these are the simply elements that creating simplicity. The next principle is transition. Transition is a gradual change, can be obtained by the arrangement of objects with varying texture, forms or sizes in a logical sequential order. For example, coarse to medium to fine texture, round to oval, linear texture. For example, coarse to medium to fine texture, round to oval to linear structural forms or cylindrical to globular postate plants. Transition from shorter to taller plants and from fine to coarse texture would unframe the scene and makes it appear closer, like a painting on a wall. Generally, transition assists in the gradual movement of a viewer eye to the design and within it. Transition in color can be illustrated by the radial sequence on the color wheel as previously discussed in elements. It's possible to use transition to extend visual dimension beyond actual dimension. For example, radical lines in the private area of landscape can be used to in-frame or focalize a lake scene. Transition of plant material along these lines can make the scene become part of the landscape. Next principle is rhythm, which emerges as a design elements prompt a sense of motion, directing the viewer's attention within and beyond the designated space. Consistent repetition of color schemes, lines and form reduces visual clutter and fosters rhythm. It's demonstrated through the deliberate arrangement of plants, park furniture, etc., whether singularly or in cluster. For example, installing benches at uniform intervals along a shrub border complemented by sculptures introduces rhythm diversity, mitigating any sense of monotony. Focalization involves the leading of visual observation towards a feature by placement of this feature at the vanishing point between radial or approaching lines. Straight radial lines as create a strong focalization when compared to curved line. The viewer's eye quickly follows along straight lines to a focal point. Generally, weaker or flowing lines of focalization are desirable in the residential landscape. Transition of plants or other objects along these lines can strengthen or weaken the focalization. Curved lines are stronger when curved toward each other than curved outward. Indirect focalization is created by lines curved in the same direction. Focalization can be adjusted by plant material along the lines to create symmetrical or asymmetrical focalization. Asymmetrical focalization is indirect, while symmetrical focalization is more direct, creating stronger focalization. Since focalization can be used to direct attention to a point, traffic in an area is usually directed to the point. Therefore, focalization could be used to direct traffic in a garden area. Guidance of view towards feature of commercial, aesthetic or cultural value may attract the eye of unaware without conscious effort. Here are some general guidelines for landscaping. Avoid undue complexity and go with simplicity. Add variety to an extent that unity is achieved. Use long paths such as curvaceous or zigzag and different objects according to color scheme to break the monotony. Keep the natural grade of land and demand of landscape in mind. Incorporate landscape plants as well as trees as per their landscape value and utility. Attempting an excessive amount in a little space should be avoided. The design allocated to each area should be functional and convenient access. Here is the summary. The fundamental concept of landscape design is problem solving through the use of horticultural science, artful composition and spatial organization to create attractive and functional outdoor for different uses. The elements like line, form, texture, color and visual weight and principles like proportion, order, repetition, unity of design are used to create spaces, connect them and make them visually pleasing to the eye. Thank you all of you for joining me for today's class. That's all for today. Next, I am going to teach you about the designing step by step how a landscape design to be done. Thank you so much.